if I get one more comment like this. 10 key is nothing like piano. Like what? That's barely an octave. These comments would make more sense if I were playing 24 key, which you guys have seen me play on this channel. But before we get into the modern context of 24 key, I want to go over the brief history of this mode to really understand what it's all about, and what makes it different from other kinds of VSRG. This is not a documentary channel, so don't expect a full in-depth analysis or anything like that. I'm mostly going to be referencing the wiki, along with some other things I was able to discover myself. Keyboardmania originally had 3 arcade releases in Japan, spanning from 2000 to 2001, each mix containing about 20 songs. Seems like there's a wide range of genres here, despite the main premise of the game being a piano. Unlike other vertical scrolling rhythm games, where the chart patterns loosely represent the music, as far as pitch positioning and chords go, Keyboardmania is pitch accurate, in that each note within the chart reflects exactly what's being played in the music. There's obviously some leeway to that, in that every instrument is not being represented, as well as maybe easier levels omitting some notes for the sake of keeping the difficulty level in check. It's basically piano. The normal mode spans 2 octaves, from C3 to B4, as well as there being this wheel that tells the player to spin up or down. There's doubles mode, which introduces 2 more octaves, and another wheel. This is more in line with playing an actual piano, since the 2 hands will be distinctly divided in playing bass versus melody. If you're playing doubles by yourself, there is this divider line in between that spaces out the 2 octaves from each other, similar to Beatmania DP. Veteran players are probably used to this, but traditional piano players might get messed up by this, as they already have the muscle memory of real piano playing. This game only features 3 judgments in which the player can achieve: miss, good, and great. Think about all the other games that also have a perfect and maximum judgment. They probably decided to keep things simple here due to how much dexterity is required for this game. Outside of the arcade releases, there were 2 home console releases for the PlayStation 2 in 2000 and 2002, including its own controller. And there's also this PC release, Keyboardmania Yamaha Edition, which seems to require the Yamaha Easy 250i keyboard to play, but we'll get more into that later. There hasn't been any future releases or sequels to Keyboardmania recently, well, except for nostalgia. This game was released in 2017, and while it does feature a piano-like controller, it's not exactly like Keyboardmania. For one, the charting is loosely based on the song. There seems to be some attention to detail of things such as chords and pitch relevance. However, the black keys here are not real. The notes within the chart do not exactly match what they would be in sheet music notation. On top of that, players don't even have to hit the exact note anyway. Each of these sort of represent a cluster of notes, and as long as the player hits one of these within the allowable space, it will be counted as a hit. I guess you can think of it as a sort of judgment. Harder difficulty songs have smaller windows here, requiring more accurate fingering. But again, it still doesn't match how you would actually play the song on piano. It really just seems like a version of piano tiles on steroids, and probably should be treated as such. If you're interested in playing piano songs in a semi-realistic way, then stay away from this one. So that leaves us with the remaining PC options when it comes to playing 24 key, and the rest of the video will pretty much cover what I discovered over the last few weeks. As mentioned earlier, there is the PC version of Keyboardmania, but I think it's expecting you to have the Yamaha keyboard. This error message pops up if you try to open the game without the keyboard plugged in. Reddit user RevoltJuiceon provided a link to the patcher that comes with instructions and a method of getting the game to run with any keyboard. After getting everything set up, we're in the game. You'll notice that the screen is locked to a 600 pixel resolution. If you have your NVIDIA scaling set to no scaling, you're going to be left with black bars around your entire monitor, depending on your native resolution. Going into the settings, and I have no idea what any of these do. Obviously, BGM volumes controls that, but for this game level and key setting, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe the game level affects the judgment in some way. Because this is an early 2000 game, it still has those arcade aspects in it, such as playing 3 songs and then returning back to the menu, and getting a game over. There is this practice mode which lets you navigate to specific measures of the song and play them slowed down to really understand the fingering. It is a bit clunky to navigate these menus with keyboard controls only, but it's nice that these options are present. The game came preloaded with a few songs here, but adding custom levels is really easy. The way the game works is by importing any MIDI file chosen by the player and dividing them up into different difficulty levels based on which instrument is layered in the MIDI. Because of the maximum allowable octaves in this game, any notes not within this octave will get shifted up or down, depending on where they originally were. The simplicity of only relying on MIDIs here makes it quite simple to add whatever custom music you wanted, with a few issues. MIDI files that have intricate layering with many different instruments will kind of be rendered useless here. As everything gets imported in the game, there will be many difficulty levels with just 50 notes of like a bass line going for 10 seconds. It can also be hard to navigate to the main melody instrument that you intended to play in the first place. With MIDI files that decided to have everything on one instrument, usually the piano, this can create some intense levels that are way too advanced for what this game is really supposed to be, including that shifting mechanic that I talked about earlier, and a lot of sections in the chart can become unnecessarily dense, with some of the notes getting layered where they're not supposed to. So really try to be careful about that. There seems to be this massive delay between when you hit a key and when the key is played within the game. There's also a delay between when you hear when you're supposed to tap and the visual cue of tapping when it lines up with the receptor. This is a major issue within this game, and you really have two options of going about it. Either you can play with your own keyboard muted and really pay attention to the song when it comes to the timing, meaning your taps would be earlier than what would feel correct. This still has a slight issue of the in-game keyboard noises feeling delayed, but it's an option. Or you could play with the in-game audio muted and play with your own keyboard sounds. The timing will feel the most correct this way, as there's not much delay between the visuals and what you hear from your keyboard. But it can be easy to get lost where you are in the song, especially if you have an easier level with lesser amount of notes. It's also easy to lose timing in general, as there's no metronome or static music to base your timing off of. Honestly though, this method is probably more rewarding. Once you get good enough to where the levels you're playing are closer to the actual piano pieces, it will actually sound like it. But again, you lose out on any accompanied background instruments and the experience becomes less immersive. Still, with these two options, I think the latter one is slightly better, as I really think that timing component makes or breaks a lot of these games. That's pretty much all there is to Keyboardmania. Because it's from a different time period, we don't have a lot of these features that we come to expect from modern rhythm games, such as visual or audio offsets and auto key hit sounds. There is one more program from the 2000s I want to take a look at. Mania can be thought of as how Stepmania was to DDR. It simulates that arcade game for PC while bringing in user customizations and different songs. Right off the bat, we got a lot more options to choose from. A lot of these are straightforward though. MIDI delay might be that issue I was talking about earlier, of how in Keyboardmania, the in-game keyboard sound is delayed from when you actually hit. I tried messing around with the settings, but I never really seemed to notice a difference, so I just left it on 5. There's some other settings here and there. I think Force Terminate immediately boots you from the level on 0 health. When we get to the song select screen, we have more control of how we can navigate the list, which is nice. Selecting a song gives us options to play normally, autoplay, view mode, which is kind of like practice mode, and return to select. We also have the option to change the scroll speed here, as well as the song rate, through these keybinds. This is better than having to enter Keyboardmania's entire practice mode. With Do-Re-Mi, we still have that weird delay between the keyboard audio and the in-game audio. There is no in-game keyboard sound exactly, so this does affect how we go about dealing with this issue. Maybe there is a way to set up the MIDI delay to avoid this, but for me, I think it's best to just play with real keyboard sounds muted, and listen to the in-game audio. It feels playable. Like once you really get into a song and into the patterns, you kind of just get used to the timing here. It's not that big of a deal. The game does seem to run not as smooth as Keyboardmania. I guess this number in the corner represents the frame rate, so 65 FPS. But there's noticeable amounts of stuttering here and there, and I kind of just glossed over a major issue. Like with Keyboardmania, this game is locked at a small resolution, and unlike that game, there is no full screen option. Maybe there's apps or settings that allow you to change the scale of any program, or to force full screen, but what I've been doing is just using Windows Magnifier whenever I play. It's clunky and messy, but it's a quick enough solution to where I don't have to worry about this issue that much. If you have a second monitor or something, you could crank the resolution down on it to where the game would take up all the screen space. Anyway, the way Do-Re-Mi handles songs is through PMS files. These instruct the game which instrument of the MIDI files are to be played for the level, as well as which background instruments are enabled or disabled. All of this is set up through the PMS converter, which only works on the Japanese version of Windows 98. Seriously. I mean, the program opens and you're able to load in a MIDI file, but trying to export it just causes nothing to happen. So I loaded up a virtual machine and converted a few MIDIs. The funny thing is, Keyboardmania basically does this automatically, but at least with the PMS converter, you know exactly which instruments you're setting, and you're not left with a bunch of extra useless charts. Plus, this game spans more octaves. Still, it's a lot of trouble installing a whole virtual machine just to convert a Mario Kart song. Outside of Synthesia, these are the only 2 games where you can quickly import MIDI files to play them on a keyboard. Well, except for one more. I've talked about SoundSphere a lot on this channel. While it doesn't support these kinds of PMS files, it does support MIDI files, but this causes the chart to load in 88 key, as well as basically converting every half note, quarter note, whatever, into a long note, which makes any of this hard to read or play. 2 simple fixes here. For one, they could copy how Keyboardmania handles MIDI files and split up each one into different levels depending on which instruments are present. And 2, auto mapping could be grouped into octaves. So let's say the bass is 88 key. If I were to crank it down to 48 or 24, then any additional notes outside of these ranges could get pitched down or up, or even just removed. Down converting from 88 key already exists in SoundSphere, but it's messy and you essentially lose out on any pitch accuracy, so there's really no point in doing it in its current version. Hold on, I just thought of an idea. Wow, that worked. Lastly, I want to talk about BMS-ON files. There are these 24 key charts that are linked in a 10K plus resource document, and these can be played with programs like VSRG or Quilight. I think for the most part, I prefer Quilight because it feels more modern, but I've kind of gotten used to the VSRG skin a bit. The timing in these programs seem pretty okay. You can play with both in-game and keyboard audio, and it won't feel too delayed, though BMS just always seems to have different timings from what's in OSU or whatever. So if these two programs are so decent to play in, a lot smoother, no delay, and has all these modern features, why have I been bothering with these 20-year-old Nintendo 64 looking games? And that comes down to content. The 24 key charts only seem to come with about 100 songs, and that's it. Sure, these are fun to play, but I really want to practice sight reading as much as I can, so playing the same songs over and over might just lead to memorization, rather than truly practicing how to read. And it's not only that, some of these songs either I just don't like, or they're out of my practice range for difficulty, so it really comes down to me playing like 10 songs and that's it. With Keyboardmania, there's so many additional songs, along with those that came in the PMS backup, and even more depending on how many MIDIs I feel like converting. If there's some other 24 key BMS packs that I missed out on, or anything like that, please let me know. But honestly, 24 key isn't going to become my main mode or anything like that, just something I play on the side, so I'm not too concerned about having that many additional charts. And when it comes down to it, I could just play piano, right? Looking for information in this video really showed me how obscure these earlier games are. There was just this one website and this Reddit post which basically contained everything I could find. A lot of people probably aren't even aware of this game's existence, as normal BMS or even just 4-key takes up a lot of players' interest. There is this one channel that seemed to upload a lot of Keyboardmania autoplay charts 8 years ago, and the Do-Re-Mi Mania channel, which is posting piano visuals of various songs, quite recently even, and they have that same website linked in their bio, so it could be run by the same person. You hear a lot about game preservation when it comes to Nintendo games and emulators, so I hope people are able to remember and experience these more obscure rhythm games, as well as maybe even create newer modern experiences that replicate what the originals intended. We're seeing that with clients like Quilight and VSRG, but imagine if there were whole communities making new charts and skins and everything to further improve the playing experience. But I guess 24 key is just that niche mode that people look at and would rather play an actual piano, or just stick to the simple 4-key, 7-key meta.